So welcome everyone to Body and Soul. And we are going to be, I think this is our fifth class in the series, fifth or sixth class in the series. And we're going to be discussing finally the Sefirot today. And I want to thank Dr. Eleanor Gudis for making this class possible. And may it be a source of bracha for her and her family, for good health, long life, and everything good. Okay, so today is the Hilula, the Yahrzeit of the Arizal, Rav Yitzchak Luria, the famous Ari, who was really very much responsible for a massive and significant movement towards making Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's Zohar available to the rest of us. He was the first step in that, making it accessible. And he has a whole series of systems. I wouldn't even say that it's a system per se, but many systems and explications and models of how to approach the secrets of the Torah, aka Kabbalah. Okay. And the Ari, we know what his teachings were because of his famous student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was the one who published his teachings. He wrote them up as well, because the Ari himself hadn't published any books. And we know today, sort of in the academic world, we know that this is referred to as a Lurianic Kabbalah. And really, without it, we wouldn't, it's the fulcrum upon which the later explicators of the secrets of the Torah were able to pivot from and go from. So, for example, Naomi, I'm going to let this person in. I think it's somebody who comes. I'm going to let her in, and I'm muting her completely. And let's see. Okay. So anyway, it comes from it comes from Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, and then the Ari, of course. And then also there were others who expanded on this, the Vilna Gaon, very notably, but for our intents and purposes, the tradition of the Baal Shem Tov, and most specifically with his great-grandson, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And so much of what we'll be discussing today is based on Rebbe Nachman's explanations for and insights into the system of the Sefirot, which I'm going to explain, but not all, because I think it's important to get a taste of the different approaches we can use when discussing these systems. Now, many people know that the Kabbalah isn't supposed to be taught or supposed to be learned until one is 40 years old, says the classical text, says Chazal actually, and they're not supposed to learn it unless they're men. However, today things are quite different. So I'm not going to say that previously there weren't women who learned at least these aspects of the Sod of the Torah, the secrets of the Torah. There certainly were. But what I will say is that today it's become more acceptable for many people to learn Zohar HaKodesh specifically, as well as some other Kabbalistic texts. And the reason is due to our Rebbe Nachman. He's the one who explained that people might need a different of inspiration into learning. And they might need to do this at an age that isn't 40 years old. First of all, you might need to be younger. And secondly, we know his own grandmother, excuse me, not great-grandmother, the Baal Shem Tov's daughter, Odel, as well as his children, his daughters, certainly had access to many of the teachings of this area of Kabbalah. And therefore, we're not doing anything shocking by learning it today. It's become very commonplace, but what has become commonplace is mostly Kabbalah removed from any life force. That has really become what's become popular, because it has been popularized by sort of cultish groups and celebrities and so on, or it's been popularized by kiruv groups, which is a good thing, but they've taken out a lot of the meat, so to speak, either in order to teach it to everyone and to sell, red bracelets, whatever, or in order to bring people in and make them find a point of connection with Torah that is spiritual and mystic. So for our purposes today, our main approach, and the main approach I take in general with Rebbe Nachman's teachings, is to focus on the psychospiritual aspects of what we're going to learn, meaning the emotional and spiritual aspects, which really are one and the same, which is why I use the term psychospiritual, or as in psychology and spirit. And also, in addition to that, the physical, because it's very closely related. So without further ado, so also I do want to say one more thing, that I was very delighted at the Hashgacha Pratis, in that I've been really trying to get to this particular class for 3 weeks, but I realized I had to cover other things first. And so it's very fitting that we are going to begin learning this today on the Yahrzeit of the great Ari. Okay, so let's talk about the Sefirot, because that's going to be our main focus for the next few weeks. I have a little sore throat still. Okay, so the Sefirot, can be viewed in a few ways. One, they can be, let's see if I can admit this person. Hopefully it's the person that, the Sefirot can be viewed as light, and a way that Hashem brings his light or reveals his light in this world. It can be viewed as a system of bringing this light into this world. And it can also be viewed as a system in which we have an interface with Hashem, in which we ourselves take in all these lights and then give back through our own development something, a spiritual energy that has some emotional and intellectual content to it that goes right back up towards Hashem. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a diagram, a very simple diagram. Excuse me 1 minute. I'm just going to open the Zoom. Let's see, how do I add? Okay, I'm trying to find the share screen. How do I find the share screen? Oh, here it is. Okay, let me see. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this. I copied this, I think I copied this from maybe Anatomy of the Soul by Rabbi Chaim Kramer. Honestly, don't remember where I copied it. And what we have is we have the Sephirotic chart. And this is the organization of the Sefirot that everyone uses. It can be superimposed over the human body. And as we go through each of the Sefirot and their connection to the body, and of course, obviously to our health and healing, we will talk about that. Suffice it to say, what we can do with this chart is we can look at it in numerous ways. The first way that we're going to look at it is to understand that even though there are 10 Sefirot, we see here 11, and we have to ask a question. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. How is that possible? There are only 10 Sefirot. So why is that? So that's because this Sefira dot is what we could call a quasi Sefira. Okay. It's something that only expresses itself in a Sefira-like way when this first Sefira up here, I'm hoping you can see me point, when this first Sefira up here, Keter, is not present or pictured as in this chart. Okay, so the Sefira also can be looked at as a series of midot, expressions of measurement. Midot can also be translated as qualities or attributes. And in common parlance, in the vernacular, when we say a mida or midos or midot, we are referring to personality traits, okay? But in their essence, they're far more than that. What they are is a way of categorizing and dividing these lights that Hashem has given to us. Now, when we look at this, what we have to understand is that in no way should the Sefirot appear to be separate from Hashem, or in any way, God forbid, having an independent existence. Really, what they are is various phases of Hashem's, we use the term light, but Hashem revealing himself to us and acting on us as we act on the whole system, so to speak, which I mentioned before, and we'll talk about that. So these, the Sefer Yitzira says that these Sefirot are blima, okay, without substance. Again, they really are a construct that gives a structure to reality. And what we must understand about this is that if we get lost in the Sefirot, I mentioned earlier about the ways this has become popularized. I don't want to knock all of that, by the way, because I think it has its value. I mean, so many people get turned on to Torah because of it. But what we have to understand is that they don't have an independent identity and existence on their own, okay? Really, they're giving a form and structure to each of the worlds. And if you will recall, we spoke about the worlds last week or the week before, included in the section on the levels of the soul, I think. So each world, okay, has its own set of Sefira, meaning that it has this structure imposed on each of the world: Atzilut, Beria, Yitzira, and Asiya. And each of these structures, interestingly enough, give us a hint to the etymology of the term Sefirot. So when we talk about, for those of you who remember, the world of Atzilut, which is the world of nearness, the world of emanation, the world of utmost closeness to Hashem, that isn't, everything's Hashem himself, but that isn't Hashem himself. This word, Sefira, we are taught, has derived from the word sapir. Sapir, if you listen, you can automatically know what that means. It means a sapphire, some say a diamond, but it's a very valuable gemstone. And it's a very valuable gemstone when it's very clear and pure, okay? And when it flawlessly reflects light. And therefore, the Sefirot of Atzilut are all expressions of or characterized by flawlessness and purity, in which they reveal the light that I was speaking of, Hashem's light, his infinite light. And therefore, in this world, they're very pure. We don't have access to that world. So we'll go down to the next world, which is the world of Beria, the world of creation. And here, the word Sefira is said to be derived from the word Sipor, which means story. And it is, as is mentioned in Tehillim, that the heavens tell of Misaprim. They tell the Misaprim. That's the telling of the story of Hashem. So in this world, Sefira tells the story of creation. It may not express creation or manifest creation, that actually doesn't, but it tells the story. And this is just a little adjunct here. I would like to mention that in Rebbe Nachman's stories, he in many ways tells the story of all the worlds and all the Sefirot, but I would say that perhaps we find they connect at the very highest level of the world of Beria. Okay, next. The next world is Yitzira, the world of formation, where things begin to gather and form. This is also the world of the angels. And here the word Sefira is derived from the word sfor, which means a border, okay? And therefore, this means that it's giving boundaries and borders or form, like the word Yitzira, to the beginnings of creation, and it's setting in limitations, okay? So we went from the top purity, flawlessness, brightness, to the world where we need boundaries and limitations in order so that there can be a world. In order for there to be a world, in order for there to be creation and existence, we must have these boundaries. We must have something, vessels, to hold creation. And in order for us to feel our separation, we need to have this concept of sfor, of a border or a boundary. Next, we go to the world of Asiya, which is the world of action, our world. And this is derived, the etymology, the etymological connection is mispar, which means number or counting. And numbers give an absolute quantitative quality to those limitations, those borders. And it signifies the structures or the borders within infinity. Okay. And by the way, this is very lofty and philosophical. We're really going to get down to earth, but I wanted to express to you the importance of understanding that the Sefirot are structures, lights, vessels, and so on that exist to reveal Hashem in all the worlds, and that they exist, so to speak, in all the worlds. Okay, now, each of these Sefirot, we can also understand, have this certain, so many notes here, thank you for your patience, have this certain aspect of being almost holographic, in that each Sefira has the potential to, it actually contains all the aspects of the other Sefirot. So within Keter, there also is a Chachma of Keter. There also is a Bina of Keter, whether there is actually a Da'at of Keter or not. We can talk about that. There's a Chesed of Keter and so on. And within each of those divisions, there are more divisions. Does this go on into infinitude? I actually asked that question and I couldn't find the answer I wanted to find. So we're going to leave that as a question mark. And hopefully one of the rabbis who hasn't gotten back to me yet will get back to me. Okay, now let's look at this chart. What we can see here, I hope, let me see. I really hope that you can see, I hope you can see me pointing. So the chart can be divided in a few ways. What we're going to first do is we're going to look and see the obvious, that these are divided into 3 poles. We have a right side, which is Chachma, Chesed, and Netzach. I hope everybody can see that. We have a left side, which is Bina, Gevura, and Hode. And we have a middle pole, which is Keter, and then the quasi Sefira dot, Tiferet, Yesod, and Malchut. Okay. The right side, we have giving, loving kindness, an expression outwards, a masculine expression. On the left side, we have a judgment, a restriction, a feminine expression, and in the middle, those Sefirot represent a unity of right and left. So very generally, the Sefirot are divided right, left, and middle. Now, we also have another division that we can look at. That division is we have the upper Sefirot, and in this case, I'm going to refer to Chachma, Bina, and Dat. Okay, we're going to leave Keter out of the picture for a minute. And these refer to the intellectual Sefirot, the thought processes, as well as the heart, okay, because the heart is bound up in our thoughts, the emotions are bound up in our thoughts. And these are commonly known as Chabad. Excuse me, I'm just going to turn off this fan because it's blowing on me. They're known as Chabad. Everybody knows the term Chabad. And then we have the 7 lower Sefirot, which are the more emotive Sefirot, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hode, and Yesod, and then Malchut. Okay, so that's another division. We have an upper division and a lower division. All right. Now, we are going to look at the chart and we're going to just really discuss very briefly the flow of this light or this expression of godliness. And we're going to start with, again, very briefly, an overview with this idea of Keter, which means crown, okay? And then we're going to look at where it ends up, Malchut, which means royalty or sovereignty or kingship. And we can see that it's like a maze or a course, let's say an obstacle course, because we know life is filled with obstacles, in which something comes down through Keter, that light, okay, which we're going to find out more about that as we discuss Keter. And it goes through all the Sefirot. Okay, you can see, kind of see it ping-ponging back and forth there through with those bars that are interconnecting them. And it comes out in Malchut. What is this process? How can we describe this very briefly? So the Keter, which we are now going to translate as crown, okay, is the direct interface between Hashem and the structure represented by the Sefirot, and therefore it is a crown. It sits atop the head, not part of the head like Chachma, Bina, and Dot, which are within. Okay, it sits on top and is also often referred to as ayin, which means nothingness, because it's beyond really our graspability. And Hashem's expression of light comes down through that and somehow ends up coming out into and through this, into this world, into Malchut. And Malchut, which is kingship, represents a few things. It represents Hashem's kingship in this world. Okay, this is where the direct interface comes out into this world, because in order for Hashem to be king, okay, or to be a ruler, a sovereign, he has to have people willing to receive. So Malchut represents the reception of everything above it. Okay, all the different paths and resting stations and development stations, we can even liken this to birth, the development stations, okay, of this light that comes down. So very briefly, I'm going to explain to you how these are translated. But today we're going to focus on Keter primarily, and a little bit on its relationship to Malchut, because once we get down to this Malchut, then what we receive, we make something of and send it back up to Hashem, very often in the form of prayer, and certainly in the form of the mitzvot. We'll talk about that. Okay, so I hope this isn't too conceptual. I really am very practical, but I think it's important to understand these concepts as we move forward, but to not get lost in the concepts. It's really important to not get lost in it is a beautiful and alluring model for us, but we shouldn't get lost in them because it's important to apply them. That's the only purpose, is to apply them. Okay. So Keter is crown. And it has a few meanings. Very briefly, it means will. Okay, we'll talk about more meanings as we get more into it. Chachma it's translated as wisdom. Okay, and it represents the mind, and it represents the foundational wisdom, the axioms that exist. Okay, the truths. Bina. Okay, Bina is usually translated as understanding. Okay, we'll talk more about Bina. We've spoken about it before in the video on the heart. And it represents a kind of logic and ability to analyze and understand. Dot, this quasi Sefira, represents, it's translated as knowledge, but it's a holy awareness and expression and connection of the above. Okay, sort of the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge translation. Honestly, I don't find that makes so much sense when you actually look at a dictionary. And I find that, I don't want to say it's misleading, but I find it confusing. So I'm going to translate these in more words rather than just use one word for the sake of convenience. Okay. Then we have chesed, which is loving kindness, which is giving. And then we have Gevura, which is judgment and restraint and strength. We have Tiferet, which is harmony, truth, and beauty, and a blending of loving kindness and restraint, which makes perfect sense, okay, when you think about it, because that's true beauty and true truth is not leaning too far one way or the other. So it's the path of emotional moderation. Then we have Netzach, which is translated as victory and enduring on to infinity, because the only true victory is infinite. Okay, if victory fades, then it's not really a victory. Victory, in order to be really a win, has to last forever. Okay. And then we have Hode, which is submission and also splendor. Very interesting. So we find that this context, this idea, this concept of splendor is intimately involved with this idea of submission. Okay. Then we have Yesod, which represents the covenant, the Brit. Okay. And then we have Malchut, as I mentioned, this kingship, this authority, this reception, and also we'll use the term reciprocity, giving and taking, okay? Or taking and giving, actually, or receiving and giving would be even better. Now, I'm now going to show you, I don't have the body part thing, but very, very briefly, again, we'll go more into this as we go along. I'm going to discuss the body parts, our anatomy as it relates to the Sefirot. Don't think that this is just a nice model. This has very profound, meaningful ramifications for our bodily functions and health. We'll discuss it further. So Keter represents the skull, or the cranium, or it affects the skull and cranium. It's the location of it, okay? But the skull, in a way, we know, hard as a rock, we're hardheads, some of us, we know the skull is above the mind. The mind does take place in the brain primarily, as well as the heart. And okay, today we know it also takes place in the gut with the mind-gut biome. And interestingly enough, Rebbe Nachman speaks about the influence of food and digestion on our minds, and we'll get into that as we move forward. Okay, so Rebbe Nachman, of course, certainly foresaw this very clearly. Bina represents the left brain and the heart primarily, okay? And Dot represents the brain stem or the spine. Okay. Chesed is the right arm and the hand, and the right side of the body in general. Gevura is the left arm and hand, and the left side of the body in general. We know that when we give tzedakah, we always give with our right hand. Okay, even if you're just putting coins in a charity box. Sefirot represents our torso. Netzach is the right leg. Hode is the left leg. As I mentioned, Yesod is the procreative organs, the Brit Milah, and the Brit, and the channel for life. And Malchut represents, interestingly enough, the mouth. Okay. It's so interesting that Malchut, okay, I am going to admit this person. Hopefully that's a real person. Malchut, which comes at the bottom of the chart, represents the mouth, because the mouth is our organ of expression in this world. And this is how we proclaim that we accept Hashem as king. And very shortly, please Hashem, hopefully we'll be doing it in the next few days before Tisha B'Av. But if not, we'll be doing it, of course, on Rosh Hashanah. We crown Hashem king on Rosh Hashanah, and we do it with our mouths. Of course we do. We can do it every day in our prayers from the Siddur and in our Psalms. Okay, so you've been given an overview. I don't want you, the reason why I don't have everything all written out, because I actually started to, when I thought about it, I could write them in, and I have Adobe Illustrator, and I was going to type them in. And then I began to think about it. I don't think it's necessary to get caught up so much in that map. Plus, there are plenty of maps online that you can go to. Okay. So we have kind of an overview here of the Sefirot, and there really is a lot more to say about them. But what I want to do now is I want to get to Keter today. Okay, and let me stop screen sharing. Let me see if I can figure out how to stop. Okay. Oh, great. Okay. So I want to get to Keter today and to really discuss this idea of Keter, which transcends us. So let's talk about what Keter is. In some ways, it's easier to talk about what it's not, okay? Because Keter is really that point where, but that's why it's called nothingness, why it's called ayin. It's that point where Hashem, his will, is meeting this world, okay? That's a very difficult way to, it's very difficult to describe this, but the idea is that in this ladder that we have here, what we want to understand is that Keter is the beginning point. It's pre-thought, pre-conceptual thought. And it's not only Hashem's will, but when we look at it in terms of using these Sefirot to help us function mentally and emotionally and physically, then we can apply it to a description of our own midot, our own personal attributes. And Keter is now describing our own will. Now, ideally, our will aligns with Hashem's will. Ideally. What is will? Ratzon. It means determination, want, desire. Okay. And so ideally, we all are totally connected to Hashem, and we can do nothing different from Hashem's will. But Hashem didn't create us like robots, okay, or angels who are created only with one mission to follow Hashem's will in a specific area. Instead, we are created with free will, bechira, the power to choose, the power to choose what. So when we talk about this, usually we say we have the power to choose something good over something not good, or the power to choose chocolate instead of vanilla. But what's important to really get at with this concept is we have the power to choose how we are going to align our will. It's an extremely internal process, okay? Extremely internal process. So when we decide what we're going to choose, what has to come into this equation, and what usually comes in subconsciously, is what is my will? Okay. What do I want my will to be? Now, Rebbe Nachman explains, okay, that the power of will is everything. He focuses a lot about this. He has many lessons on this. And he explains, if you want, you do. So I would describe this in that chart we just saw. If you have the quality of Keter and you are embracing this quality of will, okay, then you will be able to malchut, okay? You will be able to express out into this world, as well as send back up to Hashem your action, okay? I hope everybody understands that, or at least understands it in general. So if you know what your will is and you act according to your will, or you make the choice, which is a pre-step towards action, okay, to choose a will that's in a positive alignment with Hashem. If you do this without kidding yourself, we all kid ourselves at times, okay? If you do this, you will be able to act in this world. So when Rebbe Nachman says, if you want, you do, he's really describing this process. It's very deep, very simple, and very deep. Now, Rebbe Nachman has a lot of lessons on this. One of these lessons is Likutei Moharan Tinyana lesson 110. And in this lesson, he discusses this idea that if you are never trapped. People think they're trapped, okay? But they're never trapped. If you want to change, you can change. Now, this is based on the presumption that you have some, what we could call divine consciousness, holy awareness, okay, of Hashem. Because most of the world doesn't want to change, okay? This is like a big secret, okay, that really is an open secret. Most of the world, most of the people in this world, perhaps even some people here, and certainly some of us at some of the time, want everything else to change to suit our will, our desire. We don't really want to change, okay? And if we at least get to the point of recognizing that the gift of Bechira from Hashem, the gift of Keter, the gift of will, okay, is the ability to choose what's going to be and bring to us the greatest flow of godly light down into our lives. If we accept this, if we recognize this, we are so much closer to true spiritual growth and development in service of Hashem. Okay, this is why the Sefirot are important. This is really what it's about. Okay, the woo-woo stuff and the intellectual concepts are beautiful, elegant, and interesting. But what this is really about is each of us, our personal psychospiritual and a development in our physical development as well, because it does have a reflection on our physical health, slightly different for each person. Okay. So when we get from level to level in our lives, as we grow, okay, the next step is always recognizing that we have to act, and we have to choose, and we have to act. That's always the next step, is making this determination. And Rebbe Nachman has such good advice. I tell myself this advice all the time, and many of you who've learned with me or coached with me, you hear this all the time. I'm not repeating myself mindlessly. I need to hear this all the time. The Rebbe says like this: what if you don't want? What if you really don't want to align your will to Hashem's? I mean, do we really want to do it in everything? No, we have our own desires. We want to impose our own vision of ourselves on the world. We want to have our own pleasures fulfilled, which is an important part of will, and we'll discuss that, because pleasure is certainly something good in this world when embraced properly. So what's going on here with this friction between us and really wanting to develop the healthy approach to will and desire? So it's very interesting. Somebody came up to the Rebbe and said, you know, listen, I know I'm supposed to be doing this holy thing and that holy thing, but I just don't really want to. He was honest. And the Rebbe said to him like this. He said, but do you want to want? This is the seed. This is the nut to ask yourself. I ask myself this daily when I get into one of my inner battles. Okay, let's be honest. I don't really want to say every single page of my davening, Shacharis Mincha B'Arif. I really don't want to. But can I look at my Nekuda Tova? Can I embrace a Zamra, which everybody here should know, or at least have a glancing familiarity with, and ask myself the question, the Rebbe, the good question, designed to bring out the best in us. Ask ourselves the question the Rebbe asked his chassid: what do you want to want? Certainly, each one of us wants to want. Maybe we have a battle with truth. Maybe we have a battle with patience and anger. Maybe we have a battle with jealousy We all have battles with despondency and depression throughout Torah. All the tzaddikim tell us it's a big battle. Rebbe Nachman speaks about it. But do we want? Do we want to overcome? Do we want to change? Do we want to move out of the space that feels like a trap? Okay. So the two concepts, I really want to, it's so important that you hear these. I'm just going to sum them up. The first concept here is that you have the power to choose, but you have to really understand what will is, okay? You have to know that's where choice begins. And then the second thing to look at is do you want to want? If you really don't want to, do you want to want? Okay. And of course, I don't even want to include this concept because please God, we're not on that page, but the page of everything else around me has to change. There's nothing wrong with me. Okay. So that's certainly not a very Jewish concept, yet at the same time, we also have to just look at our strengths and good points as well. Okay. Now, Rebbe Nachman says something else, very much a commentary on this idea of Keter. Okay. He says, excuse me, I'm another had this cough for several weeks now. Okay. He says that the top of knowing, the ultimate wisdom, knowledge is not knowing. That's what Keter is too. Okay. Keter is this ability or this insight that really, if we truly know, if we're in the know, we genuinely are able to say, I know nothing. I know zilch. I can tell you, someone who likes to learn a lot, the more I learn, the more I genuinely see, oh boy, do I know nothing. And we should each hope to grow in our knowledge of nothing. That's another aspect of Keter. Okay. All right. Now, I don't even know how I found this. I guess because I'm preparing for Elul, for Tishrei, okay, for Rosh Hashanah. And in Elul, and also in Tishrei, but in Elul, we have in Breslov a custom to learn Torah Vav, lesson 6 in the Kutei Moran. It's not an easy lesson. It's a lesson about how to do teshuvah, which of course is the primary goal of at least the first 10 days in Tishrei. Okay, how to return to Hashem. And this lesson speaks very much about the concept of humility, which is a Keter concept. And I will go over all these concepts again in more detail. And the lesson says, when a person wants to walk the pathways of teshuvah, he must be, okay, an expert in halacha. What is halacha? It's a Jewish law, but it's the path we walk, like halicha, okay? And this means that a person, okay, he's going to tell us what it means. It doesn't just mean you have to be an expert in every aspect of Jewish law. It means a person becomes baki baratzo, an expert in running, and baki b'shov, an expert in returning, okay? So this is the point of Keter, which is nothingness, which is a non-conceivable bridge between Hashem's light or expression of light down into this world and this world. We can't conceive of it. It's a point, okay? And we know a point is infinite, okay? A point in space is infinite, okay? Points aren't lines, which have a beginning and an end. So what we have here is this idea that we have to develop our ability to run, towards knowledge. There are other ways of interpreting this as well. I just want to interpret it in the context of what I said before. To run towards knowing, to learn as much as we can, to imbibe what we can. Everybody needs different kinds of learning. What I learn may not be what you need to learn in Torah, okay? But we still need to learn to keep ourselves inspired, and we need to learn in order to give structure to correct structure, appropriate structure to our service of Hashem, okay? So I need to learn, I need to run after knowing, I need to run after that connection with Hashem, and at the same time, I need to be able to return, okay, to that state in a way of realizing I don't know. And we can flip them on their heads also, because if Keter is ayin, if Keter is nothingness, then in a way that embrace of saying I know nothing can also be an extremely high level. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned before, it is a very high level. So what do we take away from this? We take away the idea that if we want to live through this structure, live through this expression of godliness in this world, we want to live with it, we have to realize it's not static and we're always in motion, okay? And if it's static, look in the mirror, you have a problem. Don't let it be static. Don't stop. Okay, there may be a moment where you have to stop, but know that the fall is only there for the sake of the rise, okay? The yerida, the descent, is only for the sake of the ascent, and it's going to be a spiritual roller coaster your whole life. It doesn't mean you won't be happy. It doesn't mean you can't find peace. What it means is if you're growing, there naturally has to be motion. If there's no motion, okay, there's no true possibility of the kind of change that uses your higher order of will. Okay. So if you want everything to change around you, that's called static. That means you are not running and returning. You're not invested in growth. But if you're not, that's okay. Rebbe says, do you want to want? Would you like to want to grow? Okay. And we all have moments like this. I'm not saying that this static experience is something that's eternal. What I'm saying is we have days like this. Okay. We have moments in time. Sometimes we have weeks like this. Okay. We feel stuck. Okay. Sometimes the stuckness itself is a descent. And if we can see that and embrace that, we know we're just about to go up again. We say, that's why I feel so stuck and falling. I'm not static. Could be static, but I'm not. The fall, the stuckness is a fall, and it's just there in order for me to get to that next level. Okay. I like to view it, if anybody ever, a gym class, you used to have the long jump and the running jump, and really if you want to jump far, you have to, it's good to have momentum like a running jump, but if you want to jump far from standing still, you have to be further enough back, okay, in order to make that jump, okay? So you need to go back in order to get that jump. If you're running, you need to go back in order to develop the momentum of running forward into your jump. Okay, now, this is very beautiful. So the Rebbe says that this is, he's describing this process of running and returning and returning and running and upping and downing and all of this as Ani Dodi V'Dodi Li. I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine, which of course is an acronym for the month of Elul. And he says, I am my beloved's, okay? I am Hashem's is the aspect of going up, okay? And my beloved is mine is the aspect of descending, okay? So when we say, I am my beloved's, we are giving ourselves, we're going up and giving ourselves to Hashem. And my beloved is mine, we are expressing godliness out in this world, Okay, there's just a little taste of Torah Vav. It's much more complex than that, but I couldn't talk about Keter without mentioning it. Okay, now I'd like to, we have a minute, we're going to go a little bit, we talked mostly about will, and I want to talk a little bit more about Keter. I hope it's okay if we go a few minutes over today. And maybe we can't, because it's too much. Okay, I want to talk about some other aspects of Keter, but I think we're going to have to do it next week. All right. Now, two things. First of all, I'm very glad we didn't get Zoom bombed today. So thank you for not Zoom bombing us. And next, does anybody have any questions? And what I'm going to ask you to do is to please type them into the chat. And I can unmute or raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Okay. I kind of muted everyone because I was concerned about, the Zoom bombs. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? If you go down the bottom of your Zoom, you will see something that says chat. You can click on it and then you can type in a question. Okay, no questions. All right. So again, thank you to Eleonora for sponsoring this class. I hope it wasn't too sort of stuck in intellectual la-la land today, but I really feel that it's important to get this basic overview before we go forward. And going forward, we're really, really, really going to continue with the definitely the psychospiritual aspects of this, because they are intimately bound up with the physical and just life quality aspects of this. I mean, we all have to approach this from wherever we're holding. And I find that, again, if we're not living a static life, we're approaching this from different levels all the time. I want to wish you a very good week. And I hope I'll see you in Psalms class tomorrow. And wishing you all the best. Okay. And yes, Veronica, yes, of course, yes, you're welcome to attend. See you next week, everybody. Thank you.